Her face suddenly went pale as she looked at my blood test results. "Mr. Bridgewater, please don't move," she said quietly. "I need to call someone right now." That was the moment my life that felt completely worthless, suddenly became worth $30 million. My name is Gerald Bridgewater, but everyone calls me Shere. I'm 53, and just 6 hours before that, technician's hands started shaking. I had been in my car, counting the coins in the cup holder to see if I could afford a cheap burger. 3 quarters, 4 dimes, a handful of pennies, $2.17. That was all I owned. Well, that and the blood running through my veins. The same blood. I was about to sell for $60 because the electric company doesn't accept pride as payment. If you want to know what rock bottom looks like, it's this: a man who once managed 40 employees walking into a plasma donation center wearing his last clean shirt, sitting beside addicts and stressed out college kids. All of us selling pieces of ourselves just to survive another week. The intake form asked for an emergency contact. I left it blank. My ex-wife Marlene wouldn't pick up. My daughter Bethany didn't want me at her wedding next month. My son Trevor had blocked my number months ago. Even my brother Dennis stopped calling after I refused his help for the 5th time. When I walked in, the security guard gave me that familiar look. "First time?" he asked. He already knew the answer. First-timers all have the same expression: shame, fear, and empty stomachs pretending to be calm. Men in their 50s who lost everything. He'd seen plenty like me. But here's the strange thing about hitting the bottom. Sometimes you find something valuable down there. Sometimes your worst moment becomes the start of something you never expected. Sometimes the $60 worth of plasma you're selling turns out to be exactly what the world needs. When the technician ran to get her supervisor, when they called in specialists, when men in expensive suits arrived with briefcases full of contracts, I realized something important. Value isn't always about your job, your title, or your experience. Sometimes your value is simply what your body has survived, things you didn't even know you fought off. This is the story of how I went from being fired at 53, laughed at by my boss who said I'd never work in the industry, again, to becoming the man whose blood saved more than 200,000 lives. This is the story of how my lowest point led me to my highest purpose. And it all started with one terrified technician staring at her computer screen, seeing something in my blood that would change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand that moment, you need to know how I ended up in that donation chair, how I became desperate enough to sell my plasma, how I was left with nothing but a body full of secrets I didn't know I carried. You need to know about Roderick Quinlan, the 38-year-old executive who ruined my career with a smile. You need to know about the email he sent me, the one I now keep framed in my office. Because sometimes your enemies end up helping you more than your friends. And most of all, you need to know that 3 hours after that technician made her phone call, a doctor from the CDC sat across from me and said 8 words I'll never forget. "Your blood could save millions of lives, Jerry." But like I said, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to where everything truly began. A Tuesday morning in March, when I walked into Midwest Distribution Solutions for the last time. A morning where I had no idea that getting fired was the best thing that would ever happen to me. I spent 25 years building what I believed was my family's construction business, only to be told I was never part of the family at all. But the real shock came when I learned who my real father was, a man whose name was known around the world. My name is Roderick Tillman, but everyone calls me Rod. I'm 45 years old, and just 6 months ago my life was completely different. I managed multi-million-dollar construction projects. People respected me. Older foremen came to me for advice. Now I clean strangers' bathrooms for a living, wondering how I became invisible to the people I once called family. You need to know something about Frank Bowden, the man I believed was my father for 42 years. Frank started Bowden Construction Group from nothing. In 1978, all he had was a pickup truck and a toolbox. By the time he died last year, he was worth $89 million. He married my mother Louise when I was 3, right after my biological father supposedly died in a factory accident. Frank raised me, taught me everything about construction and business, and always said that you must earn your place in this world. His real sons, my stepbrothers Trent and Mitch, never had to earn anything. Trent, now 47, has soft hands that never touched a hammer, and a cocaine habit he thinks is a secret. Mitch, who is 44, is best known for crashing 3 Ferraris before he turned 30. While they were relaxing at the country club, I was learning to read blueprints at 16. What hurts the most is that I truly thought we were a family. I never missed a Sunday dinner, a Christmas morning, or a company celebration. When Frank had his heart attack 5 years ago, I stayed at the hospital for 2 weeks. When the company almost collapsed in the 2008 recession, I worked day and night to save it. I negotiated with creditors and secured a government contract that kept us alive. "Rod, you're the son I always wanted," Frank told me that night as we shared an expensive bottle of whiskey. He said, "Family is about loyalty, not blood." I believed him. That's what makes me feel naive now. Because when the lawyer read Frank's will, my name wasn't mentioned, not even once. Trent and Mitch got everything. The company, the money, the properties, even Frank's watch collection, including the Rolex I helped choose for his 60th birthday. The lawyer's office felt suffocating. My stepbrothers sat there smirking, like they had won a game I never knew existed. "You're not real family, Rod," Trent said. "Dad was just too soft to tell you." 25 years of early mornings, hard labor, stressful negotiations, and sacrificing my own life for the company, all of it earned me nothing. Less than nothing, because if I had been a stranger, it wouldn't hurt this much. My mother died of ovarian cancer 10 years ago. Her passing was quick, which was a mercy, but it means I can't ask her the questions. She knew how things would end for me. But life has strange ways of revealing secrets. Sometimes the truth sits in an old storage unit, inside a dusty box filled with forgotten things. Sometimes you lose everything to finally discover who you really are. The day I found my birth certificate and saw the name Dmitry Alexei Vulov instead of James Tillman was the day I realized my stepbrothers were wrong. I wasn't nothing. I was just hidden. Now I scrub floors in million-dollar houses and my phone buzzes with cancellations. Losing a $150 job matters to me now. At 45, this is my life, cleaning other people's mess. Hands damaged from chemicals. Back aching from years of work that used to mean something. 6 months ago, I was managing the Riverside Plaza development, a $50 million project. I had a corner office, a secretary named Denise who knew my exact coffee order, and a parking spot with my name on it. The sign on my door said Senior Project Manager. Frank had it made for me after I won the city hospital expansion contract. "Rod, you're the heart of this company," he used to say, placing his hand heavily on my shoulder in meetings. The law firm was on the top floor of a building that Frank and I had built 10 years earlier. I knew every part of that place, the beams, the joints, even the spots we had to reinforce when the soil tests came back worse than expected. I wore my best suit, the charcoal one Frank bought me when I secured the Riverside Plaza project. "You look like an executive," he'd said, fixing my tie. My son, the executive. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and lemon polish. Trent and Mitch were already there, sitting in big chairs like they owned the place, which, as I was about to find out, they basically did. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Patterson asked, speaking slowly, like he was trying not to set off an explosion. The will was 23 pages long. Frank had planned everything. Donations to the Children's Hospital, his car collection going to a museum, his golf clubs to his friend Harold. Even his dog Max was taken care of. Mrs. Chen would look after him. And Frank had left her a small trust for the dog's expenses. Then came the part that knocked the air out of me. To my beloved sons Trent and Mitch Bowden, I leave the entire Bowden Construction Group, all related assets, all real estate, and a total of $89 million to be divided equally. The words hung in the air like dust after an explosion. I waited for the next part. My name had to be somewhere. Maybe in the next paragraph or on the next page. But Patterson kept reading. More charities. His watch collection to a museum. His books to a library. Nothing for me. Not even a line. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to myself. "There has to be a mistake." "What about me?" "What about Rod?" Trent laughed. Actually laughed as if the whole thing was a comedy show. "You're not real family, Rod," he said. "You never were. Dad was just too soft to tell you." "I built half this company," I said, standing up, pressing my hands flat on Patterson's desk. "Riverside Plaza, Northgate, the hospital expansion. I saved the company in 2008. Frank said I was the heart of Bowden Construction. As an employee," Mitch added, not even looking at me, staring at his perfectly manicured nails. "A well-paid employee." Check your old pay stub if you want to know your severance. Severance? I choked out. I worked there for 25 years. I gave everything to that company. And you were paid for your time, Trent said, pulling out his phone, probably to check stock prices or text his dealer. At market rate. Dad kept good records. You can't say we owe you anything. Patterson avoided my eyes. He shuffled papers and clicked his pen over and over. I'm sorry, Mr. Tillman, he said. There's nothing for you in the will. Your final paycheck will include unused vacation time and the standard
severance, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. 25 years reduced to 2 weeks of pay. I looked at a framed photo on Patterson's desk, him and Frank, smiling at a charity golf event, each holding a cocktail. You knew, didn't you? I asked. Did you advise Frank when he wrote this will? I can't discuss client conversations, he said. But his face said it all. He knew, Frank knew. Everyone knew except me. Starting over at 45 is more than hard, it's painful. I had no college degree because Frank used to say experience was better. Why spend 4 years in a classroom when you can learn from me? He'd said when I was 18. I had no savings because I put everything back into the company, buying shares that ended up being worthless. I believed I was building a future that apparently was never meant to be mine. My reputation meant nothing without the Bowden name attached. I applied to every construction company within 100 miles. The replies all said the same things. We need someone with more recent certifications, or we're looking for someone who fits our team. Translation: Trent and Mitch had ruined my name. In construction, word spreads fast, and the rumor was that I'd been fired for a reason. My savings disappeared in 2 months. The apartment I'd rented while figuring things out became permanent. I sold my truck, my tools, even the gold watch Frank gave me for my 40th birthday. The pawn shop owner offered me $300. It's engraved, he said with a shrug, like the message to Rod. My son in every way that matters made it less valuable. That's how I started Clean Slate Services, with just a bucket, a mop, and whatever pride I had left. My first client was Agnes Murphy, the mother of my old secretary Denise. Oh, Rod, she said when she opened the door, looking at me with pity that felt like a punch. How the mighty have fallen, but good for you, dear, for not being too proud to work. 8 months later, I had enough clients to pay rent and buy food. My days started at 4 a.m. and ended at 10 p.m. for offices. In the morning, homes in the afternoon, commercial buildings at night. My knees were ruined, my hands always smelled like bleach, and I developed a constant cough from the chemicals. This was my life now, and slowly I was learning to accept it. Then everything changed with one phone call. Mr. Tillman, this is Riverside Storage Solutions. We have a unit, registered to Louise Tillman from 1982. It's about to be auctioned for non-payment. You're listed as the emergency contact. Would you like to claim the contents? My mother had been gone for 10 years. I had no idea she ever rented a storage unit. The fee to stop the auction was $400. Frank used to tell me, my sons may have my blood, but you have my work ethic. Back then, I thought it was a compliment. Now I understand it was just his excuse for letting me do all the hard work while Trent and Mitch got paid for fancy job titles they didn't deserve. They were called Vice President of Development and Executive Director of Operations, but all they really did was show up drunk at ribbon-cutting events and take credit for what I did. Frank had been in my life since I was 3. My mom Louise married him in the summer of 1982, 8 months after my real father supposedly died in a factory accident. She was working as a bookkeeper at a construction supply company when she met Frank. He always told the story proudly. I walked in to argue about an invoice and walked out with a dinner date. 3 months later, I had a family. Frank never legally adopted me. He said it was out of respect for my late father, James Tillman, the man I grew up believing had died when a boiler exploded. A man should keep his father's name, Frank would say, even if another man raises him. And I believed him, just like I believed everything else he told me. Frank was the only father I ever knew. He taught me to read blueprints before I could even read properly. While other kids went to summer camp, I spent my vacations on construction sites. By the time I turned 16, I could frame a house, run wiring, and talk to building inspectors better than foremen twice my age. You're learning things Trent and Mitch never will, Frank told me one hot July evening. We stood on the metal frame of what would become a medical center, watching the sunset through steel beams. Nothing gets built unless you get your hands dirty. At that time, Trent was at Yale, studying business, but really drinking his way through college. Mitch was in his third year at USC, majoring in communications, the degree rich kids pick when they don't plan on working. They came home during holidays with tans and soft hands, laughing at my calluses and the way I used proper construction terms because Frank insisted on it. One Christmas, Trent got drunk and said, "At least we're the real sons, right, Mitch? We're not charity cases." Frank heard him. He didn't defend me. He just topped up his whiskey and changed the subject. I should have paid attention to that silence. But I didn't. I wanted to belong. Every long day, every problem I solved, every project I completed, I thought it was bringing me closer to being part of the family. In 2008, when the economy crashed and the company was bleeding money, I was the one who held everything together. I negotiated with suppliers, convinced the bank to extend our credit, and won 3 government contracts that kept 200 workers employed. When we signed the last contract, Frank actually hugged me and said, "You saved us, son. You saved everything I built." He called me son. I held on to that word like it meant something permanent. Then came the cancer. It started in his lungs and spread everywhere, like it was racing against time. 3 months from diagnosis to death. During the days I ran the company. At night I sat by his hospital bed watching him fade. "Keep the company going," he whispered 2 days before he died. "You're the only one who understands it." I thought that meant he was leaving it to me. I was wrong. Even while dying, Frank knew Trent and Mitch couldn't handle anything. Trent visited twice, once to ask about the company's money and once to get Frank's signature on legal papers. Mitch came only once to take an Instagram photo. He posted it with hashtags about family, while Frank was barely awake. Then he left for a wine tasting. One night, Frank looked toward the doorway and asked, "Where are my boys?" "They'll come tomorrow," I lied, pulling up his blanket. "Trent's working on permits and Mitch is with the lawyers." He nodded like he believed me, but we both knew the truth. They were probably at the country club planning how to spend their inheritance. The funeral was a show. Trent and Mitch stood in the front row wearing expensive suits and fake sadness. They gave speeches about family and legacy. I sat behind Frank's business partners and golf buddies. The only sign I had ever mattered were the calluses on my hands, the ones earned building everything they were now claiming. The will reading was set for Monday morning, 9 a.m. at Patterson Williams & Associates. I didn't really have the money, but something inside me told me to pay for it anyway. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I just wanted to hold on to anything that still connected me to her. To the time before everything in our lives fell apart. The storage unit was small. Number 510, it was full of old boxes that smelled like mothballs and forgotten years. On top of one box was her wedding dress from when she married Frank, still wrapped in plastic that had turned yellow. Under it were photo albums, boxes with my baby clothes, and her jewelry box with the fake pearls she always wore to church. I almost didn't notice the old filing box. It was pushed into a back corner, water damaged, and held together with duct tape that was barely working. Inside were tax papers from the early 80s, birthday cards she'd kept, and a manila envelope labeled important documents in her neat handwriting. At the very bottom was my birth certificate. I had never seen the real one before. Frank had always handled all the paperwork in my life. Driver's license, passport, everything. Name Roderick James Tillman. Mother, Louise Marie Tillman. Father, Dmitry Alexei Vulov. I read it 3 times. Dmitry Alexei Vulov, not James Tillman, the factory worker who supposedly died in a boiler accident. Someone named Dmitry Alexei Vulov was my father. My hands shook as I sat in my van outside the unit typing his name into my phone. Before I could finish typing, the search engine suggested the rest like it was a name people searched often. A slow-loading Wikipedia page appeared on my cracked screen. The first sentence made me pull over properly because I felt like I might crash. Dmitry Alexei Vulov, 52, 91, Russian-American businessman and heir to the Vulov mining empire. There was an old black-and-white photo of him at some formal event. The man in the picture looked like me 20 years younger. Same jawline, same deep-set eyes. Even the same nose Frank always joked didn't look like anyone in our family. I kept reading, each line rewriting everything I thought was true. My father wasn't a factory worker. He was the heir to a mining fortune stretching from Siberia to Nevada. He didn't die in an accident. He vanished during a federal investigation, leaving behind billions and a child no one knew about. My mother hadn't married Frank for love. She had married him for safety. She created a new identity for us and hid the truth under decades of stories and Sunday dinners. Every time she cried about James Tillman, every time she said, I had his hardworking nature, none of it was real. I read on, sitting in my running van with the heater blasting in the November cold. The article said, Dmitry Vulov controlled around 40% of Soviet-era uranium exports through Shell. Companies in Switzerland and Canada. His legitimate businesses included huge copper and silver mines in Nevada, Montana, and Alaska. When he disappeared in 1981, he was worth $2.8 billion. There were details about federal investigations, money laundering suspicions, and how he vanished just before he was supposed to testify. Then I saw the line that made me drop my phone. Vulov's estate remains in federal trust pending the discovery of a legitimate heir. A sealed court document from 1979 confirms one surviving child from a relationship with Louise Marie Tillman. Estimated current value of the estate, $4.7 billion. I picked up my phone and called the law firm listed, Hartley, Brennan and Associates in Washington, D.C. Hartley, Brennan and Associates, how may I direct your call? I need to talk to someone about the Dmitry Vulov estate, I said shakily. Sir, your name? Roderick Tillman. I think I might be his son. Please hold. Classical violin music played. Way too calm for a moment. That was turning my entire life upside down. In less than a minute, a man came on the line. Mr. Tillman, this is Jonathan Hartley. We've been waiting for your call for 35 years. The next 6 hours felt unreal. They sent a private jet to pick me up. By evening, I was sitting in a conference room in D.C., looking out over the Potomac River, surrounded by lawyers and federal agents who had been searching for Dmitry Vulov's child since before I could walk. Your mother was incredibly smart, FBI agent Sarah Corbin said as she slid a thick folder across the table. She reached out to us right after your father disappeared, Agent Corbin explained. She was terrified his business partners would come after you. We put her in protective custody, created the identity of James Tillman as your fake, deceased father, and moved her to California. But she married Frank Bowden, I said, still trying to connect everything. That was her choice, Corbin replied. She believed marrying a small construction worker would be the perfect cover. No one would think a billionaire's heir was growing up in a regular working-class family. She intended to tell you the truth when you turned 25. But by then, Frank had become more successful than anyone expected. She didn't know how he'd react if he found out. The DNA test was just a formality. I looked almost exactly like Dmitry. The results came back in 2 hours, 99.99% match. The lawyers had been preparing for this moment for decades. Every paper was ready, every form already filled out, waiting only for my signature. Hartley pulled up spreadsheets full of numbers that didn't seem real. The government has managed the estate very carefully, he said. The mining businesses alone bring in around $200 million a year. The investments have multiplied. There are properties in 12 countries, shares in major banks, and mineral rights covering half of Alaska. I kept saying this can't be real, but the evidence was undeniable. Photos of my father at White House dinners, secret meetings with officials, and documents explaining why my mother had run. Your mother sacrificed everything to protect you, Corbin said. She showed me letters my mother had sent over the years, checking in with the FBI to make sure it was safe. She could have claimed this money any time by revealing your identity, but instead she scrubbed toilets and married a man she didn't love so you could grow up safe. Then they handed me a final document, a letter from my father, written the day before he disappeared. He knew my mother was pregnant. My dear child, it said in careful English, if you are reading this, the world is finally safe enough for you to know the truth. I have made mistakes and trusted the wrong people, but you were never a mistake. You are my greatest achievement. Money and power don't matter, you do. Live the life I never could. Become the person I failed to be. Your loving father, Dmitry. I signed the papers at midnight. Just like that. $4.7 billion was transferred into accounts with my name on them. That morning I had been cleaning toilets. By midnight I was one of the richest men in America. The irony was almost painful. Trent and Mitch had split $89 million from Frank's estate. The federal trust transferred $4.7 billion to me. But sitting in my hotel room at 2 in the morning, staring at bank numbers that looked like phone numbers, I didn't feel proud, I felt hollow. Money couldn't give me back the 25 years I spent believing. I was building a family legacy that never existed. It couldn't change the fact that Frank died without telling me the truth. It couldn't explain why my mother chose a hard life over claiming what belonged to us. But the money did give me something new, the power to write my own future. My first call was to my own lawyer, not Frank's, not the company's. Mine. I want to buy Bowden Construction. Sir, he said, with your wealth, you could buy 10 companies that size. I don't want 10. I want the one I built. It took 3 weeks to buy it. By then, Trent and Mitch had blown through $8 million each on cars, drugs, and failed crypto bets. When I offered $50 million cash, they accepted instantly. When I walked into the Bowden building again, Denise, my old secretary, dropped her coffee. Mr. Tillman, how? Long story, I said, heading to Frank's old office. But I'm back. I kept the Bowden name on everything, not because of Frank, but because I had earned that name with my own sweat and long nights. A month later, Trent and Mitch were broke. They came into my office, Frank's office, wearing wrinkled designer suits. Rod, buddy, Trent said with a fake smile. Family helps family, right? I leaned back in the old leather chair. You told me I wasn't family. Remember? That was grief talking, Mitch said, shaking a little. Maybe withdrawals. Maybe fear. Your dad left you $89 million, I said. Where is it? They had no answer. I'll give you jobs, I said at last. They looked up instantly. Entry level, I added. Project assistants. Minimum wage. You'll report to Miguel, the new foreman. He doesn't speak much English, so you'll need to learn Spanish. You're joking, Trent said. I'm giving you the same chance Frank gave me. Take it or leave it. They took it because they had no choice. Now they show up every day. Miguel sends me pictures sometimes. Trent carrying lumber. Mitch learning blueprints. They're terrible at it, but at least they're trying. Which is more effort than they ever gave when they had millions. I use my fortune differently than my father or Frank. The first thing I built was affordable housing for construction workers, men who build cities but can't afford to live in them. There's a daycare, a clinic, and a center where kids can learn trades if college isn't for them. In my desk drawer, I keep 2 photos. One of Frank and me, both covered in sawdust at my first job site. Despite everything, he taught me how to work hard. And one of Dimitri, the father I never met but who shaped my life anyway. I turned my mother's storage unit into a small museum room. Her photos, her letters, all the lies she created to keep me alive. She gave up billions so I could grow up hidden from dangerous men. That was love, real love, the kind that doesn't need money or blood to prove itself. Sometimes losing your family shows you who you truly are. Sometimes being told nothing helps you. Discover you are always something more. And sometimes the truth hidden in a dusty storage unit is worth more than any fortune. Here is your rewritten, simple English, copyright-free versions. It's not just about having more money. It's about realizing your whole life is different. Who you really are, where you truly came from, and what you can become. If you like this story, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder that their worth isn't defined by other people. Feel free to comment below about a moment when you discovered your own value after someone tried to put you down. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories about second chances, hidden truths, and what truly makes a family. Thank you for watching.